Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the members of the panel. Mr. Weinberg, is it Weinberg pronounced correctly? You spoke in verbatim earlier saying that it might help moving forward with GCC states to give the youth, and I quote, a greater say in their societies. The curriculum under which these young people are educated, can you speak to the secular or non-secular nature of that and whether or not it is inherent in that curriculum that biases against non-prevalent denominations, faiths, et cetera, might be common?
I'll speak to Saudi government-published textbooks in this regard because that's the one where I've actually read a fair number of the books.
That's where I'm going.
Yep. It's a serious, serious problem. The Islamic State in Syria actually was using Saudi government-published textbooks until, I believe it was 2014 or 2015, when they then published some of their own. I mean, this is...
And who's the... I know I'm interrupting you, not to be rude.
No, by all means.
By the way, welcome back to the Foreign Affairs Committee. Who's the #1 exporter of Arabic language textbooks on the planet Earth?
You know, that's a particular figure I'm not familiar with.
Well, how about
Saudi textbooks?
Would you believe that it might possibly be Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
And is the curriculum in these books driven by Wahhabist sentiment in general speaking terms?
Yes, and the Saudi government has also published, I think it's something like 300 million copies of their particular commentary on the Quran, which has problematic language that's not necessary in there about Christians and Jews.
Sure, and we could do this all day long, but we don't. I have a finite amount of time. I spent a little bit of time in the Balkans and had the occasion to become good friends with some local national Muslims who had siblings who were in schools, and primarily when we saw a place of worship destroyed, if it was a Eastern Orthodox or Catholic church, it lay in rubble, but if it was a mosque, very, very frequently, there was a green and white sign in 4 languages that said, "This mosque rebuilt by the generous and benevolent peoples of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia." And one of my good friends, who was a local national, who was Muslim, said, "What they're teaching my little brothers and sisters is frightening," right? And what terrible tragedy we witnessed in that civil war that arose in a society that was certainly secular enough wherein they used to hang out together, date, and spend time socially together, and that this rift was created. My fear is that moving forward, we can do all, and we need to do things like integrate young women into the opportunity network, right? But where these things are taught perpetually, what's the hope that in 30 years we aren't still countering violent extremism emanating from GCC countries? It's open-ended.
The first U.S. Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence wrote that capturing and going after terror financiers and terrorist operatives is great, but far more important is ending the stream of the ideology, ending the incitement, including an education of this sort. On the positive side, there's a relatively new Secretary General of the Saudi-linked Muslim World League, which plays a big part in this propagation of Saudi Islamic teachings, who does seem to be more focused on stopping some of the radical incitement, hopefully. He's talked a good game on some issues. But on textbooks in particular, you're right, it needs to stop, and this is an area where hopefully the Saudi Crown Prince and King are moving to curtail this stuff, but until they do, there's important legislation that you and your colleagues can co-sponsor.
And I want to reiterate comments that I've made in this committee and other places publicly as it relates to arms deals between the United States and our allies, the Saudis, and that is that I think there is a timeline that says 2030 is a magic year in which they'll hope to have addressed these problems, and I don't think, candidly, that we need to be placing arms in the hands of individuals who have an antithetical upbringing as it relates to the practices and beliefs of their neighbors. That I understand that political consequences create strange bedfellows, and that certainly there's a threat emanating from the nation of Iran, not the people thereof, and I would be clear on that. But that the Saudis need to put their proverbial money where their mouth is before we start sending advanced armaments to the tune of billions and billions of dollars, and that's just me editorializing. You spoke also to, Mr. Weinberg, Kuwaiti support for the Muslim Brotherhood, and this is a quote, and other related extremist organizations. There's obviously been some back and forth as it relates to a designation of the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organization, and I can certainly see both sides of that. Brookings suggests that perhaps it might make sense to address Muslim Brotherhood elements locally as extremist foreign terrorist organizations. Thoughts on that in my last 10 seconds?
So Qatar has supported the Muslim Brotherhood more than Kuwait.
I'm sorry, I may have gotten that wrong.
But there is no doubt that the Muslim Brotherhood is an extremist group, arguably in many instances a hate group. Some of its branches have been terrorist groups. So it may be a lot easier to go after some of these where we can meet U.S. legal criteria easily rather than this global variegated network.
Right, there's a theory that and I understand that I'm over, I'll try to wrap up as quickly as I can, that we shouldn't engage the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terror organization for two reasons. Number one, they're so disparate in their chapters. Number two, they're too big. Which is that's crazy counter logic, right? That there are too many adherents to Muslim Brotherhood philosophy, so identifying them as an FTO would be bad. I just think it's interesting to flesh out here with you all today, and I don't want to throw out proverbial babies with bathwater, but I don't think we should stop having this conversation either. Thank you.